The Early Weigh-In podcast is back this week. UFC Vegas 102. We head back for the Apex. Another middleweight main event. We got Cannonier taking on rising contender Gregory Rodrigues there. In our co-main event, Calvin Kattar taking on Yusuf Salal, who seems to kind of reinvigorated his career in his second UFC stint. We've got 13 total fights to get into. As always, want to recap last week. As far as myself, just a small win, 0.35 units on the night. Had a draw on Jimmy Crute. Probably you and I kind of both thought we should have won that one. Lost on the Bruno Brazil. Cashed on Rong Zhu. Wanted to double down on that one, but the line movement was a bit scary to me. I played the over 2.5 in Matthews and Prado. Didn't really make me sweat at all. Duplessis Strickland doesn't go the distance at plus money. Was, hoping the nose break would have ended that there. Teixeira, no flyer on the submission there. Nothing happens. And Crute inside the distance, man. Super close to hitting those. Would have been a much bigger night, but can't complain about 0.35 units. I'll toss it over to you, man. Then we'll get into this card.
Yeah, so not so good of a night for me. Minus 4.77 units. Had 2 units on Tatiana Suarez. I don't want to blame it on that I picked her for the fantasy league, but I might not have thrown that much on her. I'm happy with the number that I got considering the closing line, but she was never the side. Bruno Brazil also just never really the side. Couldn't get it to the mat. And then Anshul Jubilee. I would have loved to have seen that play out, honestly, but man, just quit betting Indian fighters. I should know that. Plus 430 just looked so good against an unbigger guy like Quillen. And truth be told, I'll be looking to fade Quillen in his next fight because he's going to be overpriced.
Right.
Steele wins by submission. I thought that he'd be able to get the fight to the mat easier. He at least gave some half attempt at a knee bar at some point, which I at least appreciated that he went for it, but just couldn't get the fight to the mat. Thickness wins in round 3. I thought he'd be there in round 3, and he was. It's just Topuria is actually pretty good, measured approach, and I thought that was a pretty decent debut. Duplessis wins in rounds 4, 5, or decision. That stopped the bleeding a little bit. I was happy to get that at plus money. I thought it was the right side. It was just a tough spot to play at above minus 200. And then Crute wins inside the distance. Yeah, I figured that he probably should have gotten the nod, but is what it is. Minus 4.77 units, not that great. Moving on to the first fight of the night, which is in the bantamweight division, women, Julia Avila taking on Jacqueline Cavalcante. Let's see what I got written down for this. Okay, clearly dogger pass at these odds, if only for the simple fact that this is a WMMA fight and it's on the prelims. Jacqueline is younger, she's more athletic, has more ways to win, but it's hard to trust somebody who doesn't have much finishing upside. I think Julia, she looked terrible in her last fight against Tate, double knee brace, couldn't defend a takedown, she looked old. This is clearly all Jacqueline. This is clearly a Jacqueline spot to move her up the rankings. I think she's the rightful favorite. It's just tough to trust her without her being able to finish. So it's a pass for me, honestly.
Yeah, she's been steamed to minus 700 at this point. No value there, but I took a small flyer on the under 2.5 at plus 230. I do think she's the much younger and much faster, much bigger girl, hits way harder, and I just think the speed difference is going to be huge here. And on the side of Avila, I think she's kind of still got the dog in her, but her body's really letting her down. And I would not be shocked if Jacqueline were to be able to find the finish here. So, kind of like you with Fatima Klein a couple weeks ago, you get in a fight plus money, not to see the distance and things, and one of them's a massive favorite. I do see some small finishing equity on the Cavalcante side, but inevitably just took the under here. That's how I'm kind of trying to approach this one. Next fight, jumping all the way up, men's heavyweight, Walter Walker, Dontel Mays. Dontel, huge dude for the division, but just isn't that good, man. The volume is extremely low. He doesn't have a ton of power for his size, and when he's put on his back, he has nothing. And I think he's going to be put on his back here by Walter Walker. So if Walter Walker, the first fight was in the UFC against Lucas Bresky, wasn't the best look. His gas tank didn't look good, but last time out, he did come in about 10, 15 pounds lighter, looked a lot better, and I think he finds his way on top. Unsure if he finds a finish, but pretty confident Walter Walker gets his hand raised here.
I think that he's the rightful favorite, not something that I'm looking to play. Still has a lot to prove. And honestly, Dontel Mays is kind of the right size that I think he could probably keep him on the end of a jab if Alter can't find his rhythm. So it's a fight that I'm looking to just completely avoid altogether. I would agree that Walker kind of has a little bit more, just pressure alone should get him the W, but I'm not sure if he can put that together for 15 minutes. So pass for me. Moving up the card to the bantamweight division, Vince Morales taking on Elijah Smith. Kind of dirty on the UFC for giving Vince yet another athletic black dude, after working his way back into the UFC. Right. Even though he lost in his comeback fight to Lapalus, there were, I guess, a couple of decent takeaways. He still wears a shot pretty well, and he did push a solid pace for the entire fight, even though it didn't really help the outcome. The downside is he did look a little old in his movements, and when he couldn't get that wrestling going, he did look a little lost. Elijah only being 22 years old, but from what I saw in the Contender Series, he looks extremely patient, methodical whenever he fights. He's obviously naturally gifted athletically, and looks to go to his wrestling pretty often. He's good at scrambles, and I'm actually pretty high on him as a future contender in the division. Elijah, 15-minute clinic with a couple of sketchy moments in the closing round is the prediction for me, but I do think that Elijah gets it done on Saturday.
I don't know really what I think about this one, man. I was very tempted to bet Vince Morales when he was at plus 200, and he's been steamed down to like the plus 135 range now. And it kind of, I kind of see where people would want to bet the Elijah Smith side. He's got clear athleticism advantage. At his age, you got to think there's going to be massive leaps in improvement from fight to fight. But, Vince is a guy that, Taylor Lapalus is a solid-ass fighter, and Vince had to take it on a week notice, had to fly to France. Good luck taking Taylor Lapalus down, and good luck outstriking him, And I feel like Vince, his pace and his pressure and his work rate has a good chance to get to Elijah Smith here late in the 2 and 3. I'm not so sold on Elijah Smith's cardio, if I'm being honest with you. I think he kind of just mismanages it a little bit. But ultimately, I think I'm going to pass, but I think Elijah Smith's going to come out here and have success with his calf kick early. And I do think that we're going to see another plus 200 something on Vince after round one. So that's kind of how I'm looking to approach it. I'm going to side with the underdog, Vince Morales, ever so slightly. But I'm going to look to get on him live now that he's been bet down so much. Gabriel Bonfim taking on Chaos Williams. It's a pretty solid fight too, man. You and I were talking about this one. If there's a super early finish, Chaos has come into the UFC and nuked a couple people in like 30 seconds. But I actually think if there's an early finish here, it's more the Gabriel Bonfim side. I do think he's very opportunistic with the submissions. And then, I told you nothing against Chaos Williams, but a guy who's, flexing the chains, the money, wanting to knock people out. Would I really be shocked if he got put on his back and didn't have much? No, I really wouldn't be too shocked. But I do think his takedown defense is good. I think his cardio is really, really good. The hardware on the feet, the power difference is, 1,000% in his direction. So to me, this is clearly a dog or pass line. I favor him every single second as this fight progresses into it. But it's one of those as well that I think he might even be able to get a better number live on Chaos if he's still there in round one. So maybe tempted to play the dog pre-fight live, but it's Chaos or pass for me on this one.
Yeah, so you look at the losses of Chaos Williams, and he's really only lost to rangy strikers. So even though I do agree with the odds makers here that Bonfim is the rightful favorite, it still will be in a way that we haven't really seen Chaos lose a fight, at least in the past decade. Yeah. Bonfim, he showed us his striking in his last bout against Angelusa. It was a pretty good display of a functional jab, some good body work. But I do think he's going to be in, some dangerous territory trying to stand in the pocket with Chaos Williams. If he can test that wrestling of Chaos early, he might find some success. But from what I've seen from Williams recently, he does get to his feet pretty good. I think if this fight stays standing, it's kind of a coin flip fight. So while I lean Bonfim because he has more ways to win, I do think that odds-wise it should be a little closer. So I lean Chaos Williams here as far as the value is concerned. Moving up the card, Rafael Estevam taking on Jesus Aguilar. Really, really good fight. Estevam is a massive 125er. He pulled from his debut fight due to a botched weight cut and then came in over the weight limit in his next one. Now it's a little over a year later. He's getting another shot at trying to make that flyweight limit. I really like him, man. When I started tape, he reminded me of a tiny Jilton Almeida. Tons of punishing front kicks up the middle, all to set up that shot, dominate on the ground. I look at Jesus Aguilar, no slouch, initially brought in as the sacrificial lamb for Tatsuro Taira, but has since put together a 3-fight win streak. He throws with bad intentions, has all the power to put your lights out, willing to sell out on a choke. And, to me, this fight just looks like a car crash. I expect things to kick off early and end quick. And even though it's flyweights, I can't help but eye that under. Yep. Estevam is the pick with an early sub, but the under 2.5 minus 115 looks pretty good to me.
Yeah, man. Don't know how much I can add to that. That's a great comparison. Man, you see guys, Charles Johnson go out there and take on super talented wrestlers, Cody Durden, Muhammad Makayev. Dude, Rafael Estevam absolutely ragdolled him like bad. I was very impressed watching that fight back. What I'm not too impressed with, obviously was the gas tank late after putting out that much output. And I think that's where Jesus could potentially capitalize. He does have a pretty solid gas tank and a very opportunistic finisher. And with as much grappling as I think Estevam can do or will do, it opens up Jesus's guillotine, which he's an absolute expert at. But I'm with you. I like Estevam to get on top. I think his grappling is legit, and I think he submits Jesus. And I was telling you, it was like minus 140 doesn't go the distance, minus 2.5 is minus 115. I'd love to find it doesn't go the distance, minus 125, something like that. I definitely think there's some violence happening here, man. Glad to see you on the same side. Jared Gordon taking on newcomer Mashuraban Rusaboev, Nursultan's brother. Haven't done any tape on him, just being honest with you. Did a little tape study or a little tapology look through, and dude seems to be kind of as fraudulent as his brother when it comes to record-wise fighting super low-level competition. And Jared Gordon is one of these guys where if you don't put him out, he's got a pretty good process. He's got super good volume, super good clean technical boxing, good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu. Durability's just kind of always been his downfall. But if you let him hang around for 15 minutes, he's going to make it a close fight. And for guys that he's better in, I think he puts a clean clinic on this guy. So give me Jared Gordon to beat the newcomer.
Let's see. No, still no overs or unders on this fight. Yeah, I didn't do much tape study either. I'm not mad at anybody who takes a little shot on Ruzi. He's flatlining people really early, and Jared Gordon, not somebody who I really want to trust his chin, even though his last knockout was the headbutt. He's still a little bit older. He's been put away a few times, and this guy's going to go after it pretty early. So if there's a crazy number on that first round finish, I don't hate it, Yeah, that's it. That's about all I have to add to it. Moving up the card, prelim main event, Angela Hill taking on Ketlin Souza at 115 pounds. This is a really close fight. Odds agree. I figured Souza would be a little bit bigger favorite coming off that Yasmin Howergy finish at UFC Noche. She's a little bulldog, man, like similar to Jessica Andrade. She makes violence and danger a huge part of her game. Certainly not the type of girl you want to get into a brawl with. And, Angela Hill seems like the fighter that would be able to put together a 15-minute game plan to beat somebody with Souza's skill set. But it's become extremely difficult to trust her in this stage of her career. And even in her prime, she made a habit of losing close fights. And this just seems like yet another matchup where Hill is going to have difficulty gaining the respect of Souza or the judges. I think most of the harder shots will be landed by Souza. My only issue with Ketlin is her history of poor durability. Most likely a good hammer, bad nail situation, but I'm just not convinced that Hill's the girl that's going to be able to capitalize on that durability problem with 12 of her last 13 fights going to decision. So give me Souza by decision because Angela Hill is a tough son of a bitch, but I do think that Souza's going to get the nod on the judges' scorecards.
Yeah, I kind of think the same thing, man. I kind of think that she's could deter 2 or 3 minutes of volume with a big shot, with a big moment in the fight, and still it on the scorecards, just like Angela loses, throughout her whole career. She's constantly losing splits off of, other girls still in the bigger moments. And then you got a girl in Ketlin Souza who's 11 years younger, coming off the biggest win of her career. I kind of get why the money's coming in on her. I do get there's competition, experience, cardio, everything on the Angela Hill side, but at 40 years old, the time's going to come sooner or later. And I think Ketlin Souza's is going to make this fight at least very close. And give me Ketlin Souza to steal a decision. I don't know how too much more I can add to it. I just feel like it's going to be ultimately be a super close fight. And one of them's over a decade younger, hits a lot harder, submission upside and everything. So, Ketlin Souza for me too. Kicking off the main card with what I think is going to be a car crash, man. Jose Delgado versus Connor Matthews. Both of these guys not afraid to get in the pocket and bang. On the outside, I do favor Jose Delgado. I think he's a better striker. I think he's got the better volume. I think he's definitely got the better durability and should be a little bit faster. Connor Matthews on the inside, I do think he has power to finish. If he were to land a couple takedowns here, I think it'd make his life a little bit easier. I do see Jose Delgado's line shooting up a whole bunch. A lot of people are parlaying him up this week. I'm not that confident. I'm confident that I think there's a finish in this fight. And I do think that Jose Delgado gets that majority of the time. But for a UFC debutant, not really in the business of laying this much chalk. He is the pick. I do think he gets the finish as well to kick off the main card.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of a squash match. The only thing that's holding me back from betting Delgado inside the distance is Connor is tough. He gets rocked in most of his fights, but he's able to fight back a lot of those times. I agree, Jose is younger, better gas tank, good camp, more power. But parlaying a minus 400 debutante and even taking a stab on the inside the distance at even money, it's not how I want to play this fight. It just seems like one that I'd rather lean back and gather some info moving forward when Delgado gets a better matchup. So for me, it's a layoff fight. I do agree with Delgado being the favorite, though. Moving up the card to was that the headliner?
Yep.
Okay.
No, that was
the opener. Yeah. Moving up the main card, Rodolfo Vieira taking on Andre Petroski at 185 pounds. Kind of feel like it's a do or die fight for the 35-year-old Rodolfo here. Pretty decent matchup for him. He's fighting another ground specialist in Andre Petroski. Petroski more of a wrestler, which would lead you to believe that the odds makers would favor top control, but not here, man. Right. Rodolfo, he's going to be, damn near impossible to have success with wrestling early. He's so physically dominant, and that's kind of the same style that Petroski likes to use early in his fights, and it's just not going to work for him. I think if this fight stays on the feet, it could be a whole lot closer. But, I've seen Rodolfo put together a decent 15-minute jab. If and when it does end up on the ground, I just tend to trust the 4-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion and the scrambles a little bit more. And I expect him to win some of the exchanges, whether it's on the feet or on the ground. I think Vieira decision is the way that I'm looking at this fight. Don't know if I'll actually get there, but that's how I see it playing out.
Yeah, I am not crazy about the big juice on Vieira just because he's not a crazy good striker, and he kind of does seem finish reliant on the mat, but it does kind of it's the opponent here and Petroski that's making him such a big favorite. Petroski, you've seen him knocked out shooting takedowns, you've seen him gas bad before. I don't really know how the fight's going to play out here. You got two grapplers. Is it just going to negate and just be a stand-up fight? Could the, collegiate wrestler and Petroski find his way on top and stay safe? Petroski's a pretty solid grappler. Maybe Petroski tires out and Vieira finds himself on top and submits him with the head and arm. I don't know, man. I don't really know how this fight's going to play out. If it is played out on the feet, I do favor Rodolfo as well. And if they do get to grappling, I feel like Rodolfo's much more likely to lock something up. Petroski, to me, feels like he's got to put together a really solid 15 minutes to get this one done, where Rodolfo, could kind of finish in a couple different ways. So I'm on the Vieira side, probably just one that I'm going to be watching as well. Moving on up, man, 155, Ismail Bonfim, Nazim Sadikov. This is the best fight on the card, I think. In my opinion, I'm super excited for this one. Ismail at range, I think he's a pretty solid striker. Really good jab, really good kicks. I think defensively he's a lot better than Nazim Sadikov is with his strikes in that range. But Nazim is the one that I think I trust more in a firefight. If this fight does get hairy, he's the one that I do think can land takedowns if anybody's going to. I kind of trust his durability and cardio a little bit more. So earlier in the week, I kind of felt pretty confident on the Ismail Bonfim side, but as we get closer to fight, not really as confident. I'm still going to lean Ismail Bonfim. Again, I think he's just going to do enough on the feet, defensive-wise, stay safe, land the better shots. I got Ismail Bonfim taking home a decision here.
Initially, I was like, I don't see this being a great fight, but I do see the appeal of it. I think that this fight goes over a ton of the time, which is kind of why I made that face initially. Not the greatest read on either guy. They're both tough. I do trust Bonfim to put together a game plan over 15 minutes a little bit more. Nazim, he'd love to engage in a slugfest, but I just think that Bonfim's a little bit more cerebral and will put together a safe 15 minutes. But there might be some hairy moments for sure. So Bonfim decision is the pick for me. Moving up the card, Edmund Shabazian taking on Dylan Budka at 185 pounds. Absolutely amazing call to get from Sean Shelby if you're Edmund Shabazian. He's had a tough go of things, like many golden boys before him. I tend to think like Kevin Lee, Alexander Hernandez, both guys that were put on a pedestal coming into the UFC, and it just didn't pan out for him. But Shabazian does put on exciting fights for the most part, and it looks like the UFC is attempting to give him another fight to get him back on track. Budka, kind of fringe UFC caliber. It's a decent wrestling game, but really struggles at rounding out his game. He's a fish off of his back. He doesn't take damage very well. And I do tend to think that Edmund touches him up early. Not sure, if I want to attack it, but the under 2.5 is minus 146. Not like my favorite number, but it is some 185ers. I do see a path to victory for Shabazian inside the distance, but I don't see much finishing upside for Budka other than gassing Shabazian out. So maybe Edmund Shabazian inside the distance or just lay off this fight. I think it's Shabazian's fight to lose, though.
Yeah, you kind of, in my opinion, started the Shabazian fade train with the Brunson a long time ago, I feel like you were one of the first ones to capitalize on him being a potential fraud. And we've seen it yet again, continuing to gas late in fights where he has a ton of success early. Here's the thing, man. Those guys he's gassing against, we're talking about Meerschaert, most submissions in middleweight and almost UFC history. We're talking about a Mavov, one of, number one contender. It's very elite guys and guys who push a much harder pace than Dylan Budka, guys who I feel like are much, much more dangerous than Dylan Budka. Dylan Budka could find his way on top in this fight, and I'm still not sold that in the third round he finds himself on top, and still not for sure that he finishes the fight. I don't think he's a very dangerous guy. I'm not sold on his gas tank. We've seen him miss weight. He's on the L3 at this point. And I think Edmund lights him up early. So, I think Edmund after round one is probably north of -5 or 600, and you're going to get even better of a line on Budka to enter live if you think Edmund's going to fade. But I think it could be like the Cesar Almeida fight. I think Edmund's so much better on the feet and could find the finish. So never going to lay -300 on Edmund with his history, but he's the clear side for me and who I think wins. Co-main event, Calvin Kattar making his return, taking on the surging Yusuf Zalal. I put 2 units on fight goes the distance here at -185. I'm almost tempted to make that a max play for myself, just truth be told. I think this fight hits the distance at an 80% clip. I think it should be -400. Zalal is a guy who's never been finished, a guy whose durability is great, and a guy who knows how to, very good defensive tendency, skirting around the edge. And I think it's going to be hard for Calvin Kattar to find him. So I don't think Calvin Kattar is going to finish this fight. And will Zalal finish it? I don't think so, man. I think I'm getting a number like this because he's went out and finished, notoriously durable guys like Billy Q. But Billy Q's hurt in that fight. Jack Shore's already retired from MMA. I think he's been very lucky to kind of get these finishes on his way back. And Calvin Kattar is as durable as they get. I've seen this guy take a shit kicking and still be there. And, I've seen him grapple with Aljamain Sterling in a hard fight and not be submitted. So, if you're not getting submitted by Aljo, you're not getting knocked out in some of these firefights with Max Holloway and things. I don't think Yusuf Zalal is finishing you, and I don't think you're finishing Yusuf Zalal. So I've got 2 units at minus 185, goes the distance. I think Yusuf Zalal by decision hits at I don't know, man, 70% clip or something. So Zalal by decision is how I feel pretty confidently this one goes down.
And you think that he outstrikes him over 15 minutes or outgrapples him?
Well, I think he could land a takedown or two, but I don't think he's going to do anything with it. I could see it being like the last minute of a round twice in a fight or something. I just think he's a very smart fighter, and will do plenty enough to get the win on the scorecards.
So I'm going Kattar here. I think just the number itself is pretty outrageous. Yeah. Zalal has looked good in that 3-fight win streak he's put together, but they're favorable matchups, and now he's a minus 400 over a staple top 10 guy in the division. Kattar, 37 years old, and for sure like over the hill, but I do still think he has a little bit left in the tank. We've never seen him, like you said, taken down and subbed immediately, even against better grapplers like Aljo Sterling than Zalal. And I think if Kattar is able to emulate a similar game plan to Sean Woodson in Zalal's first run in the UFC, keep that fight on the feet, there's a pretty solid chance that he's going to out-volume Zalal, who is notoriously low output on the feet. I think he's averaging less than half of what Kattar's output is. And I think that there's a pretty good chance that Kattar could piece him up if he keeps this fight on the feet. So I won't get greedy, but I do think that the money line, I think that it's Calvin Kattar decision. Money line plus 370 is more than enough for me, though. So at least a unit on there. Calvin Kattar simply just reaching higher heights in his career, being a proven guy. Whereas Zalal, I feel like tough first run, favorable second run, and we're finally getting to see him tested against somebody higher caliber in the division, and he simply hasn't earned a minus 400 over Calvin Kattar. So prove me wrong. I really won't feel bad if I take a flyer out on Calvin Kattar plus 370. Yep. So yeah, happy with the money line there.
Makes total sense.
Moving on to the main event, Jared Cannonier taking on Gregory Rodrigues in the middleweight division. I think this is a murder waiting to happen for one of these guys. Both are forces to be reckoned with, and I do think we get a spectacular finish here. Cannonier over at 40 years old, on a 2-fight losing streak. Best days are behind him, but he has always been an extremely dangerous power puncher, and we know that that's the last thing to go. G-Rod, really well-rounded fighter. Looks older than Jared. Still relatively young for the middleweight division, though. Yeah. He's never been the best at avoiding damage, but it's his heart and the technique that he has to fall back on that's made him a difficult fight for anybody in the division so far. Since his KO loss to Bruno Ferreira, he's put together a decent 3-fight win streak. But honestly, I think that Cannonier is a massive step up for him, man. This is similar to the last fight we just broke down. And, I know he's old, and I do think he's a little bit over the hill, but he is the value side here at plus 185. Why the hell do you want to bet Gregory Rodrigues, who always gives you a clinched butthole moment in every single fight that he's ever been in, I think this is Jared Cannonier's easiest matchup since Nick Roenrick in 2017. He has only fought the top-level guys in the division. We just saw Nasruddin Imavov put on a good showing against Israel help me out, Adesanya.
Yeah.
And he's no slouch, man. He's losing to the top level guys. And I'm just not willing to give up on him yet. Give me Cannonier inside the distance. I think he flatlines Gregory Rodrigues here. I really think he finds that overhand right. And G-Rod is sleeping on Saturday night.
I know you like your middleweight violence, but I love my middleweight overs. So
fair enough.
You're gonna give me a middleweight main event in the Apex, and you're only gonna line it at 2.5. I bet 1.25 units. Fight starts round 3 minus 125 earlier today. I just need 2 rounds. I know the butthole will be puckered, but just give me 2 rounds. Jared Cannonier has been in 6 5-rounders in a row. 8 of the dude's last 10 fights have been 5-rounders. He knows how to keep himself patient and keep himself deep into these fights. I think he knows his advantages lie deep into this fight where he has experience, and I expect him to be to keep himself safe and get late into this fight. Where RoboCop, to me, I don't know if I think he's slow. I don't really know. I guess that's the right way to put it. He's stiff. He's kind of plodding. I feel like he might have trouble landing on Cannonier early in this fight and may have to resort to the grappling where it kind of just stalls some time out. I don't know. I actually looked at Goes the Distance, and it was only plus 250. For it only to be lined at 2.5, I was really hoping for a better number than that. I've seen Jared Cannonier draw fights out time and time and time again. And I think the fight goes a little bit later. So I was very shocked to see it lined at 2.5, have some type of action a little bit over. And I think I am on the Jared Cannonier side as well. If you made me side with somebody, I think RoboCop is very finish reliant. I've not seen him in rounds 4 and 5. He always gives us moments to worry where you think his durability is cracking as well. I think if you made me pick a side here, if you made me play anybody, it's clearly the underdog. So I fully agree with you there. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, Ben, just to add on it's tough, the matchup wise that Jared Cannonier has. I don't think it's him dragging out the fights. I just think it's the matchup, man. He's lost to Kaio and Nasruddin Imavov, but the wins against Marvin Vettori and Sean Strickland, those just aren't guys that you're going to knock out. Israel Adesanya drags out the fight. He finishes Derek Brunson in brutal fashion. Kelvin Gastelum, you're not going to finish. Robert Whitaker, you're not going to finish. He fights Jack Hermanson. He finishes him in brutal fashion. Fights Anderson Silva, finishes him in brutal fashion. David Branch, the exact same thing. It's these guys, in my opinion, just like Gregory Rodrigues, that he is just absolutely demolishing early in the fight, which is why I personally, I'm looking to play it the exact opposite. But I just think that this is a perfect matchup for the 40-year-old.
Yeah, I think the 40-year-old is going to get himself back on track as well. 13 fights going down back at the Apex here. Then we head to Seattle, Washington next week for Song Yudong, Henry Cejudo. Make sure to keep an eye out for the podcast to be posted, bets to be posted later this week. Like and subscribe. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.